You check your banking app before you check the weather. A number appears on the screen. You feel something. Relief, maybe, or dread. That number isn't paper. It isn't gold. It isn't even really there. But the real answer to what you're looking at is far stranger than a number. You are staring at one of the most successful hallucinations your species has ever agreed to share. Money feels solid. It feels like a law of nature, like gravity or sunlight. You assume it has always existed in some form, that somewhere back in the fog of prehistory, your ancestors traded a chicken for a pair of shoes, and eventually someone invented coins to make it easier. That story is taught in almost every economics textbook on Earth. It is clean. It is logical. It is also almost entirely made up. For decades, economists repeated a version of history that started with barter. Two people, no money, each holding something the other wants. A farmer with wheat, a tanner with leather. They trade directly, and eventually this becomes clumsy, so money is invented to fix it. This is called the myth of barter, and the anthropologist David Graeber spent years trying to find a single society in recorded history that actually ran its economy this way. He never found one. What he found instead was something closer to memory. Neighbors did not swap goods on the spot like strangers at a market stall. They remembered who owed what. A woman who needed grain today would simply take it, because everyone in the village kept a mental ledger of favors, debts, and generosity. You helped me in spring, I will help you in autumn. Nobody needed a coin to remember that. The community itself was the memory system. So if barter isn't where money began, where did it begin? The answer starts not with trade, but with debt. Ancient Mesopotamian temples more than 4,000 years ago kept clay tablets recording who owed grain, silver, or livestock to the temple and to each other. These tablets are some of the oldest written records in human history. Before money was a coin in your pocket, it was a promise carved into wet clay and baked hard enough to survive a civilization's collapse. Notice what that means. Writing itself may have been invented, at least in part, to keep track of debt. Your ancestors didn't create language for poetry first, they created it for accounting. Trust is the real currency here, and trust needed something to represent it. Different cultures chose wildly different objects. In parts of Africa and Asia, tiny seashells called cowries became currency for centuries, valued not for what they could do, but because everyone agreed they mattered. On the remote Pacific island of Yap, something even stranger happened. Communities used massive carved limestone discs, some over 10 feet wide, as currency. These stones were often too heavy to move. A family could own a stone sitting at the bottom of a lagoon, having sunk there during transport centuries earlier, and everyone on the island simply remembered whose wealth it represented. Nobody needed to touch it. They only needed to agree. Does that sound absurd? It should. But look closer and it starts to sound familiar. Most of the money in the modern world today isn't physical either. It exists as entries in databases, numbers shifting between banks that never touch a single dollar bill. Your salary, your rent, your savings. Almost all of it is a memory, digitally maintained, the same way the people of Yap remembered who owned which underwater stone. Coins, when they finally appeared, solved a specific problem. How do you trust a stranger you'll never see again? The economist William Stanley Jevons called this the double coincidence of wants. The tricky requirement that in a direct trade, both people must want exactly what the other person has, at exactly the same time. A shepherd who wants shoes has to find a shoemaker who happens to want mutton on the same day in the same place. It rarely lines up. Precious metal coins stamped by a king solved this instantly. King Croesus of Lydia, around the 6th century BCE, is credited with producing some of the first standardized gold and silver coins, and his name still echoes today whenever someone says, "rich as Croesus." But even a gold coin is not valuable because gold does something useful. You can't eat it. It won't keep you warm. Gold is soft, heavy, and largely useless for survival. It became valuable because it was rare, because it was hard to fake, and because enough people agreed, generation after generation, that it meant something. Strip away the agreement, and a gold coin is just a shiny rock. This is the part your brain resists. You want money to be a thing, not a belief. But the anthropologist Bill Moore, who has spent years studying currency systems around the world, has pointed out again and again that money only functions because of the social and institutional trust behind it, not because of the material it's printed or stamped on. Paper money works today for the exact same reason cowrie shells worked 3,000 years ago. Enough people all at once agree to pretend it matters. Think about what happens the moment that agreement breaks. Currencies have collapsed throughout history, not because the paper changed, but because the trust did. In Weimar Germany in the early 1920s, inflation grew so extreme that people reportedly burned banknotes for heat because the paper was worth more as fuel than as currency. The material never changed. The belief did. And when belief disappears, so does the money. Here's the twist your ancestors never saw coming, and maybe you haven't either. Money was never really about gold or shells or stone discs or ink on cotton paper. It was about solving the oldest problem your species has ever faced. How do strangers cooperate at scale? A tribe of 30 people can run on memory and trust alone. Everyone knows everyone, but a civilization of millions cannot. Money became the shared fiction that let total strangers, who will never meet, who speak different languages, who live on opposite sides of the planet, cooperate as if they trusted each other completely. That is not a small thing. That might be one of the most important inventions your species ever produced, more foundational than the wheel, because it allowed cooperation to scale past the limits of memory and kinship. A coin, a shell, a banknote, a number on a screen. All of them are just tools built to let strangers believe in each other for just long enough to make a trade. Look at your phone again. That number in your banking app. It isn't backed by a vault of gold sitting somewhere beneath a bank. It is backed by a system of trust so deeply embedded in daily life that you rarely think about it at all, the same way the people of Yap rarely thought about the specific stone at the bottom of their lagoon. You just knew it was yours. You just believed the number. So the next time you tap a card or glance at a balance or feel a flicker of anxiety over a price tag, remember what you're actually looking at. Not metal, not paper, not even really numbers. You're looking at trust, stretched thin across millions of strangers, holding steady only because everyone together keeps agreeing to believe. You checked your banking app before you checked the weather. Now you know what you were really checking, not a number. A shared hallucination, thousands of years in the making that somehow still holds.